There is no bar to knowledge greater than contempt prior to examination. Most people who grow up in a Christian culture have no understanding that Yeshua was a Jew his whole life and that he never would have converted away from Judaism. They think he is a Christian. My experience is that most people that grow up in a Jewish culture reject the idea that the teachings of Yeshua hold any value for them because they see his teachings as being Christian, not Jewish. Either way, both groups have fallen into the same trap of simply believing what they have been told without examining the evidence. A few people that grow up in either culture eventually discover that Yeshua was a Jew teaching a broader Israelite audience how to read the Tanakh for themselves. As someone who grew up in a Christian culture, I followed Yeshua out of Christianity and into what I understand to be the Karaite way of Judaism. The Karaite way that Yeshua taught, and I understand it, is that we are all personally responsible for searching the prophets to determine where the scribes have changed the Torah, and then living by what we believe the original Torah to be. There was a new covenant spoken of by Jeremiah and Ezekiel. The Torah was to be written upon our heart, meaning God gave us something that we did not previously have, a conscience. Prior to the destruction of the Second Temple, it appears that God had relied upon either the generational transmission of his instructions, or, after Moshe came, the written Torah. The implication is that, originally, man knew the instructions of how to be acceptable to God, because God walked with man. Noah and Abraham clearly spoke with God face to face, and as a result, before Abraham's descendants went to Egypt, there was simply no need for the Torah, as God was speaking directly with the patriarchs. Even Israel, the father of the 12 tribes, had a physical encounter with God, but from what we are told, none of his children did. I do not mean to be offensive here, and I can't imagine I am not about to be offensive to my rabbinic Jewish brothers, so I will just say I am sorry now. The need for a new covenant of a conscience is because power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Religious authority is no different than secular authority in this regard. The Tanakh is full of stories of the corruption of the priesthood. To imagine that the priesthood has not changed the Torah is simply willful ignorance, as is the idea that the oral traditions are not modifications to the original instructions given to Moshe by men, not messengers of God. The messengers of God are called prophets, not the Sanhedrin. Rabbinic oral tradition says that Yeshua didn't exist. If he did exist, he was an amalgamation of many first-century Jewish rabbis. Or, even if he was just a single man, his teachings are irrelevant because he couldn't be a prophet. The age of prophets had ended with Malachi. Would God ever stop sending his messengers to correct scribal errors, intentional or not? Of course not. But people who were happy with the current scribal errors would have a vested interest in saying the age of prophecy had ended. Because with the ending of the age of prophecy, The Torah could be changed by a vote of the Sanhedrin. Isn't it obvious that rabbinic Jewish religious authorities don't care why a rabbinic Jew denies Yeshua was a prophet, only that you do deny Yeshua was a prophet? And yet the New Testament, through corroborated eyewitness Jewish testimony, tells us that Yeshua prophesies the destruction of the Second Temple almost 40 years before it happened, documented in writings that are widely believed to have been authored well before Jerusalem was under siege. It seems obvious that God continually sent prophets and the religious leaders simply refused to acknowledge them after Malachi. It is man who has turned his back on God, not God that has turned his back